In 2012, a new audio product arrived on the brightly lit end caps of American Target stores and college bookstores. It did not require a dedicated listening room. It did not require a heavy receiver. It did not require a trusted hi-fi salesman. It was a plastic, rubberized cylinder the size of a beverage can. It contained a battery and two tiny drivers. It cost exactly $99. On its grill, it carried an orange badge, JBL. Decades earlier, that same badge meant precisely the opposite. It meant Los Angeles engineering. It meant massive oiled walnut cabinets. It meant the heavy studio monitors at Capitol Records and the legendary L100 speakers that demanded serious amplifier power. The name stood for the physical weight of high fidelity. Now, it stood for a disposable tube tossed onto a California beach. The JBL Flip sold in the millions. But the real story of the Flip is not a corporate victory. It is the story of a brutal retail shift that redefined American sound. It is the story of how the market traded fidelity for convenience, and how the American living room surrendered to the Bluetooth speaker. America built the living room. Engineers built the sound. The market changed the rules. We tell the stories of what happened when those forces collided. Every week, we explore the American speakers and listening rooms that once shaped how people heard music, and what happened when the market moved on. Subscribe if that history matters to you. The story begins not with nostalgia, but with a specific place in Los Angeles, California, long before the living room went silent. James B. Lansing founded JBL in Los Angeles in 1946. The sound problem he attempted to solve was not portability, but immense cinematic scale. He was an engineer of the American movie theater and the professional studio, designing high-efficiency drivers that could push the explosive dynamics of a Hollywood soundtrack through a massive auditorium, or reproduce the exact, uncolored truth of a jazz ensemble for a recording engineer. Los Angeles produced this specific kind of speaker because it was the absolute center of the American entertainment industry. The West Coast sound was born here, forward, dynamic, highly efficient, and capable of playing at incredible volumes without distortion. For decades, if an American listener wanted to hear what the producer heard in the control room, they bought a pair of heavy JBL cabinets, wired them to a solid-state receiver, sat perfectly between them on a living room sofa, and listened. By the early 2000s, however, that traditional American listener was quietly disappearing. Before the portable Bluetooth cylinder arrived, the American audio market had fractured into two distinct extremes. On one side was the aging hi-fi enthusiast, retreating into smaller, more expensive niche dealer showrooms to buy heavy component audio. On the other side was the rapidly accelerating mass market, which had entirely adopted the digital MP3 file and the Apple iPod. What American listeners lacked during this transitional era was a way to share that digital music without being permanently tethered to a wall. If a college student in a dorm room or a family in a suburban backyard wanted to listen to digital files out loud, they were forced to buy an iPod dock. These were static, plastic base stations, often manufactured by Bose, Altec Lansing, or Sony, that required a physical pin connection to the device and a power cord plugged directly into an AC outlet. The music itself was completely digital, but the physical playback remained trapped on a desk or a kitchen counter. The gap in the market was massive, and the friction was rising. The smartphone era was just beginning to take hold. Phones were gaining the ability to stream music from newly launched platforms like Spotify and Pandora, but the tiny, tinny internal speakers of early iPhones and Android devices were entirely incapable of producing anything resembling high fidelity. American listeners wanted their music to move with them, to the public park, to the basketball court, to the garage, to the tailgate. They did not want to leave their phones plugged into a dock across the room while they texted or scrolled. They needed a speaker that could untether the sound from the wall, survive the physical abuse of the outside world, and project enough volume to be heard over a crowd. The traditional hi-fi industry largely ignored this demand, viewing the smartphone as a threat to audio quality rather than a new distribution channel. The problem was not that Americans had stopped loving music. The problem was that the traditional component stereo system was completely incompatible with the speed of modern American life. In late 2012, Harman International, the parent company of JBL, recognized this American absence. They leveraged their massive acoustic engineering resources to build a product that completely abandoned the traditional rules of the listening room. The American entry occurred with the release of the original JBL Flip. The specific circumstances of its arrival marked a total departure from JBL's history. There was no dedicated hi-fi dealer placement. There was no stereo store demonstration. The first JBL Flip was not reviewed in the glossy pages of Stereophile or Audio Magazine, where the company had built its legendary reputation. Instead, it was placed directly into the modern arteries of American consumer electronics. The mobile phone accessory aisles of Best Buy, the brightly lit end caps of Target, and the endless digital storefronts of Amazon. The Flip was launched at an initial American purchase price of exactly $99, roughly $135 in today's currency, or less than a single day's wage for the average American worker. At a time when a basic entry-level pair of traditional bookshelf speakers and a required Yamaha or Pioneer receiver might easily cost upwards of $400, the JBL Flip was priced as a frictionless impulse buy. The early American reception was defined not by audiophiles, but by technology reviewers, teenage consumers, and early smartphone adopters. Influential online publications like CNET and PC Mag immediately tested the product. They praised it not for perfect stereo imaging or flat frequency response, the metrics that defined traditional hi-fi, but for its sheer volume and utility. It sounded vastly larger than its physical dimension suggested. It was rugged enough to survive being shoved into a gym bag. It was loud enough to fill a small college dorm room. Available industry estimates suggest that Harman's engineers had achieved something remarkable. They had managed to compress the illusion of full-range sound into a plastic tube with an internal volume of less than a single liter. The company that had once required massive wooden cabinets the size of small refrigerators to produce deep bass had figured out how to trick the human ear into hearing bass from a cylinder that weighed just 1.11 pounds. The engineering division did not rely on heavy magnets or large paper cones. They relied on digital signal processing to carefully push tiny drivers to their absolute mechanical limits without tearing them apart. The American market had been waiting for exactly this compromise. The traditional hi-fi industry looked at the plastic cylinder and saw a toy. The American consumer looked at it and saw liberation. The Flip did not need a specific room, and it did not care about the acoustic properties of the drywall or the carpet. The speaker had solved the problem of mobility. It had also taught the parent company that the future of their revenue would not rely on wood veneer or careful listening, but on a retail system that would ultimately reward disposability. The original JBL Flip was not a high-fidelity instrument, but it was an absolute masterpiece of modern acoustic packaging. To understand how it captured the American market, one must describe the speaker exactly as a college freshman. Unpacking it in a cramped, cinder-block dormitory in 2012 would encounter it. The cabinet was not the wooden box. It was a tight, rigid plastic and metal mesh cylinder. It felt surprisingly dense and substantial in the hand. The grille did not feel like the delicate, acoustically transparent cloth of a vintage 1970s speaker. It felt like industrial armor, designed to repel physical impacts. When the user pressed the power button, the speaker emitted a synthetic, digitally generated guitar chord, a loud branded audio signature confirming it was awake. The user then opened the settings menu on their smartphone, tapped the JBL icon, and the connection was instantly made. The music played. To achieve this seamless experience, the JBL Flip relied on a precise combination of modern technologies that must be clearly understood. Bluetooth speaker, a portable speaker that receives sound wirelessly from a phone, tablet, or computer. Driver, the moving part of a speaker that physically pushes air to create sound. Digital signal processing, or DSP, a specialized microchip inside the speaker that constantly monitors and alters the audio signal, artificially boosting bass at low volumes and strictly limiting it at high volumes to prevent the small drivers from destroying themselves. Lithium-ion battery, a rechargeable power cell built permanently into the speaker chassis to provide untethered electricity. The physical reality of the Flip was defined by its drivers. Inside the small tube, JBL mounted two tiny 40mm transducers, barely an inch and a half across. In a traditional acoustic environment, drivers this small are physically incapable of reproducing deep bass frequencies, because bass requires a massive amount of moving air. But JBL engineers utilized aggressive DSP to equalize the sound, forcing those tiny drivers to work furiously within their safe mechanical limits. Later generations of the Flip would perfect this design by adding a specific mechanism to the ends of the cylinder. Passive radiator, a speaker-like cone without a voice coil that moves with air pressure to reinforce space. When a 2012 consumer played a hip-hop track through the Flip, they could visually see the rubberized ends of the cylinder vibrating violently. The bass was not deep in the traditional room-shaking sense of a 15-inch living room woofer, but it was punchy, present, and entirely shocking for a device the size of a water bottle. The American price context heavily dictated this breakthrough. At $99 in period dollars, the JBL Flip occupied the exact center of the modern retail sweet spot. Its closest premium competitor at the time, the Jawbone Jambox, cost $1999. The Bose SoundLink Mini, released shortly after, demanded $199. A full component stereo system, complete with a budget Yamaha receiver and entry-level Polk audio bookshelf speakers, would cost at least $50, requiring assembly, speaker wire, and a permanent dedicated location in a room. The Flip required zero setup, cost less than a pair of running shoes, and offered immediate gratification. The specific American distribution breakthrough was not a singular famous magazine review, but a massive retail flood. Harman International aggressively secured end-cap shelf space in Best Buy and Walmart. More importantly, they flooded Amazon, placing the Flip directly in the path of millions of consumers searching for wireless smartphone speakers. The Flip bypassed the traditional stereo dealer network entirely. It did not need a knowledgeable salesperson to explain impedance or amplifier matching. It sold itself on a display rack where a teenager could press a button and hear the loud, bright, processed sound cut through the ambient noise of a department store. The American moat that JBL built was formidable. Competitors could not easily copy the exact balance of volume, durability, battery life, and price that Harman's global supply chain allowed them to hit. A cheaper knockoff speaker found online would distort heavily at maximum volume or suffer from terrible battery life. A more expensive audiophile-focused portable speaker would cost twice as much and fail to survive being dropped on concrete. JBL found the exact intersection of acceptable sound and absolute lifestyle durability. The design was so distinctive that the cylindrical, mesh-covered tube soon became the default visual shorthand for a wireless speaker. The badge on the grille was not decoration. It was a promise, about sound. Specific American institutions and communities adopted the product in rapid waves. College campus bookstores stocked them beside textbooks and hoodies. High school athletic teams used them in locker rooms. Suburban families brought them to neighborhood barbecues. Tailgate communities in college football parking lots abandoned heavy boomboxes for paired sets of Bluetooth cylinders. Tech reviewers at The Verge, Engadget, and Wired magazine repeatedly recommended the Flip line as the undisputed king of budget Bluetooth audio. Early American market metrics indicated an absolute rout, while traditional component speaker sales remained flat. The Bluetooth speaker category exploded. By the time the Flip 3 was introduced just a few years later, JBL was not just participating in the portable audio market, they were rapidly coming to dominate it. The company was shipping millions of units, expanding the product line, and permanently altering the trajectory of their own engineering departments. The speaker had solved the outdoor environment. It had also begun to train an entire generation of American listeners to accept the disappearance of the stereo illusion. To understand the absolute peak of the JBL Flip series in the American market, one must first understand the complete reconfiguration of the spaces it conquered. By the late 2010s, the American listening ecosystem had undergone a silent, structural revolution. The dedicated listening spaces that had once defined audio consumption, the finished basement with the heavy carpet, the living room with the carefully arranged sofa, the college dorm room with the milk crates full of vinyl records and a silver Pioneer receiver, had been completely dismantled by the smartphone. Historically, American sound was defined by geography and acoustic philosophy. Los Angeles built the original massive cinema drivers. Cambridge argued for the accuracy of acoustic suspension. Hope trusted the high efficiency of the folded horn. Framingham trusted the reflected sound of the room itself. Baltimore sold performance to the middle class. But Shenzhen and the modern global supply chain, directed by Harman's corporate headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, sold uncompromised convenience to the American backpack. The JBL Flip series, evolving relentlessly through the Flip 3, Flip 4, and Flip 5, became the undisputed soundtrack generator for specific, vital American spaces that traditional hi-fi could never reach. Name the locations where music was actually consumed in the late 2010s, and the cylindrical mesh speaker was there. The Venice Beach basketball courts in California, a cramped cinder-block dorm room at Ohio State University, the crowded, sun-baked tailgates outside an Alabama football stadium, the scaffolding of a Chicago construction site, the dashboard of a rusted Honda Civic in Florida whose internal radio had broken, the workbench of a suburban Texas garage. The Flip was not treated as a piece of delicate audio equipment. It was treated as a utility like a flashlight, a pocket knife, or a cordless drill. The American production and distribution milestones achieved by the Flip line were staggering. While traditional domestic speaker manufacturers measured success in thousands of wooden pairs, sold annually through specialized hi-fi networks, JBL measured Flip sales in the tens of millions. The product line expanded aggressively to cover every possible outdoor scenario. If the Flip was the standard, the JBL Clip was the smaller, carabiner-equipped version designed to hang from a hiking backpack. The JBL Chart was the slightly larger version with a massive internal battery designed to charge a dying smartphone. The JBL Extreme was the heavy, shoulder-strapped replacement for the 1980s boombox. The brand became a ubiquitous, unavoidable presence on the shelves of every major American retailer. Best Buy dedicated entire, illuminated aisles strictly to JBL's portable line. Target stacked them on towering end caps during back-to-school rushes and holiday shopping seasons. Amazon's algorithm heavily favored the brand, placing it at the top of virtually every portable audio search. By the release of the Flip 4, the speaker had become entirely waterproof. It carried an IPX7 rating, meaning it was capable of being fully submerged in a backyard swimming pool, pulled out dripping wet, and continuing to play without a single second of interruption. The hardware had completely conquered the elements. The defining American cultural moment for the JBL Flip was not a specific famous review, a Hollywood studio installation, or an audiophile endorsement. It was the moment the product became practically invisible through absolute ubiquity. By 2018, it was impossible to walk through an American college campus or a public park on a warm spring afternoon without hearing the distinct, DSP-heavy, punchy bass of a JBL Bluetooth speaker. The specific American context was the absolute dominance of the smartphone and streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music. Music was no longer an activity that required sitting down, remaining stationary, or paying close attention. It was a background layer to a highly mobile life. In a loud American construction site or a crowded public park, where a delicate, perfectly imaged pair of audiophile speakers would be useless, and a heavy battery-powered boombox would be too fragile, the right portable speaker could establish a 20-foot radius of loud, aggressive, surprisingly deep sound, close enough for the listeners to believe they had brought the radio station with them. The American response was unprecedented sales and absolute brand dominance in the lifestyle audio sector. Tech reviewers stopped comparing the JBL Flip to traditional speakers entirely and started comparing it only to its own previous generations, or to direct portable rivals like the ultimate ears boom. It won industrial design awards, consumer choice awards, and editorial recommendations year after year. At its peak, in the late 2010s, the JBL Flip looked exactly like what it was: a triumph of mass-market industrial design, wrapped in tightly woven, brightly colored acoustic fabric, capped with rugged rubberized bumpers, and featuring large, tactile volume buttons that could be found without looking. It was an object built to be handled roughly. The badge on the front, the iconic orange square with the 3 white letters, no longer evoked the fragile wood veneer, the delicate grill cloth, or the rotting foam surrounds of the 1970s L100. It meant durability. It meant a 12-hour battery life. It meant survival. The peak American metrics were difficult to isolate purely from Harman's massive global revenue, but industry estimates suggest that JBL captured double-digit market share in the portable Bluetooth audio category, driving billions of dollars in revenue. They shipped tens of millions of portable units worldwide. They employed vast global manufacturing networks to pump out the cylinders in a dozen different colors, from standard black to teal to camouflage. They had successfully navigated the most dangerous transition in consumer electronics, successfully pivoting from a legacy hi-fi manufacturer to a modern tech giant. But scale comes with an inherent structural cost. The Flip had conquered the American outdoor space, the backpack, and the casual listening room. But in doing so, it had profoundly changed how Americans listened to music. It had trained millions of ears to accept compressed digital audio, artificially simulated bass, and a tightly restricted mono soundstage as the absolute standard of good audio. The speaker was wildly successful, but the market around it was fundamentally changing the definition of high fidelity. The victory in the portable space would ultimately fund the brand's survival, but it would also mask the slow, irreversible death of the traditional American stereo system. The decline of an American speaker empire is rarely a single catastrophic event. It is usually 8 overlapping market forces arriving in sequence. In the case of JBL and the American listening room, the tragedy was not that the company went bankrupt or that the factories physically collapsed overnight. The tragedy was that the company survived by completely abandoning the very acoustic principles and retail systems that had made the brand legendary. The structural forces that dismantled the traditional American audio market and elevated the JBL Flip were Force 5, technological retail, and listening culture shift, intertwined deeply with Force 4, corporate consolidation, licensing, and brand dilution. The American turning point did not look like a failure. It looked like a spectacular earnings report. By the mid-2010s, the writing was clearly onto the wall for the parent company, Harman International. Sales of traditional passive wooden speaker cabinets, the kind that required an external receiver, heavy copper speaker wire, and dedicated floor space, were steadily plummeting across the entire consumer audio industry. The American living room had fundamentally rejected the component stereo system. The space around the television was being rapidly conquered by the plastic soundbar. The space outside the home was being completely conquered by the smartphone and the Bluetooth cylinder. The internal corporate realization was purely mathematical. A $100 plastic cylinder, manufactured by the millions in overseas assembly lines, generated vastly more reliable profit. With significantly less retail friction than a $1,000 pair of heavy, domestically designed wooden towers. The problem was not that the traditional component speaker sounded bad. The problem was that it required the listener to stop moving, sit down, and pay attention. The retreat from traditional American hi-fi was quiet, steady, and ruthless. JBL did not stop making large speakers entirely. They maintained a high-end synthesis line for wealthy audiophiles, and continued their massive professional audio dominance in commercial cinemas and concert arenas. But for the average American middle-class consumer, the JBL brand retreated completely from the living room stereo rack. The company simply stopped trying to convince the American public to build a dedicated hi-fi system. The component product lines that had once filled the glossy pages of audio catalogs were completely eclipsed by the relentless, brightly colored lifestyle marketing of the Flip, the Charge, and the Extreme. This corporate pivot triggered the first deep crack in the old system. The traditional independent stereo dealer simply stopped carrying mass-market JBL component speakers because the mass market no longer walked into stereo stores. The most devastating consequence of this shift was the complete collapse of the American hi-fi dealer network. Local stereo shops, the exact brick-and-mortar businesses that had built JBL's reputation in the 1970s and 1980s by proudly demonstrating the massive L100s to awestruck customers, could not survive in this newly accelerated economy. A dedicated audio retailer with a physical showroom and knowledgeable staff could not keep their lights on by selling 99 plastic tubes with razor-thin wholesale margins. This was especially true when Amazon offered free 2-day delivery directly to the buyer's front porch. As American consumers bypassed the physical listening room entirely for the online shopping cart, the traditional stereo stores starved. The massive floor-standing speakers that once drove dealer profits gathered dust. The competitive displacement was total, but it was an internal displacement as much as an external one. The JBL Flip did not just compete with imported novelties, the ultimate ears boom, or the Bose SoundLink. It competed with the very idea of sitting still. Why would a college student spend $400 on a pair of entry-level bookshelf speakers and a stereo receiver, when they could spend $100 on a Flip that they could seamlessly carry to the basketball court, the dormitory shower, and the library? The buyer switched because the pace of the American lifestyle had permanently accelerated. The cheaper, battery-powered speaker did not need to image perfectly. It did not need to accurately recreate the three-dimensional soundstage of a live acoustic jazz club. It only needed to sound good enough in a chaotic space where the buyer no longer sat exactly between two cabinets with their eyes closed. The market publicly praised the idea of high fidelity, but it overwhelmingly rewarded absolute convenience. By prioritizing the backpack over the living room, JBL secured its financial dominance, but it permanently severed its relationship with the culture of careful listening. The speaker still worked perfectly. The market that had once supported it simply ceased to exist. The Long Decline, Part 3, 30 35-15. In March 2017, the ultimate culmination of Force 4 arrived. Harman International, the parent company of JBL, was officially acquired by the South Korean technology conglomerate Samsung for $8 billion. This transaction must be understood clearly. Samsung did not spend $8 billion because they wanted to build better wooden hi-fi cabinets for American living rooms. They bought a massive, deeply integrated global ecosystem. They bought Harman's immense footprint in automotive audio. their connected car technology, and the highly lucrative, high-turnover world of portable consumer electronics. The orange badge remained on the grille. The listening culture behind it changed entirely. Under the massive corporate umbrella of a global technology conglomerate, the JBL Flip series became a perfected, highly iterative commodity. Every year or two, a marginally updated generation was released. The Flip 4 gave way to the Flip 5. The Flip 5 gave way to the Flip 6. Each version slightly tweaked the DSP algorithm, marginally enlarged the internal battery capacity, or changed the physical shape of the passive radiators. But the fundamental reality of the product shifted permanently from an audio instrument to a disposable technology item. This was the final American chapter for the mass-market speaker. A traditional wooden speaker cabinet built in a Los Angeles factory in 1975 could theoretically last forever. If the foam surround onto the heavy paper woofer rotted, it could be replaced. If a capacitor in the crossover board drifted out of specification, it could be easily resoldered. If the tweeter blew, a replacement part could be sourced and screwed into the baffle. The traditional speaker was a physical asset. The Bluetooth cylinder is a consumable. Inside the tightly sealed, waterproof plastic casing of the JBL Flip sits a volatile lithium-ion battery. Every single time the speaker is charged and discharged, the internal chemistry of that battery degrades. After 3 to 5 years of heavy American use, left baking in hot car trunks in Arizona, frozen in winter backpacks in Michigan, and drained at maximum volume on the beaches of Florida, the battery inevitably fails. Because the speaker is sealed with heavy industrial adhesives to maintain its strict IPX7 waterproof rating, it is profoundly difficult for the average consumer to open the cylinder, source a correct replacement battery, and successfully repair it without destroying the housing. The object was deliberately designed to resist maintenance. When the battery finally refuses to hold a charge, the entire speaker is rendered useless. The perfectly functional drivers, the advanced digital signal processing chip, and the rugged plastic housing are typically thrown directly into the trash. The American consumer does not place it on a repair bench. They do not search for replacement parts. They walk back into Best Buy, or open the Amazon app on their phone and spend another $100 on the newest version. The American stereo store vanished. The concept of the sweet spot disappeared. The illusion of the stereo image collapsed. The heavy magnet lost to the algorithm. The wood veneer became a rubber bumper. The repair bench became the recycling bin. The showroom went quiet. The receiver powered down. The stereo rack disappeared. The battery finally failed. The cylinder was thrown away. The JBL brand did not die. Unlike dozens of other historic American audio companies that vanished entirely, JBL achieved an overwhelming global resurrection as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Bluetooth era. Under Samsung's corporate ownership, the iconic orange badge is vastly more visible in daily American life today than it was at the absolute height of the 1970s hi-fi boom. It is attached to millions of headphones, soundbars, and portable cylinders. But the American preservation and enthusiast community looks at the modern plastic consumer electronics with a mixture of cold indifference and profound historical irony. Across weekend estate sales in the Midwest, crowded thrift stores in the Pacific Northwest, and highly specialized online marketplaces like AudioGone and vintage audio forums, an entirely different JBL still lives. Here, dedicated collectors, independent repair technicians, and the grown children of the original hi-fi generation actively hunt for the heavy wooden ghosts of the company's past. They search relentlessly for original L100 Centuries, massive 4311 studio monitors, and heavy L65 Juballs. They gladly pay hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars for heavy speaker cabinets with rotting foam surrounds and heavily scratched walnut veneer. This community refuses to accept the disposable nature of modern audio. In small garages and basement workshops across the country, they carefully slice away deteriorated foam rings with razor blades and painstakingly glue on fresh surrounds. They melt old solder, remove degrading capacitors from intricate crossover boards, and replace them with modern equivalents to perfectly stabilize the frequency response. They apply fresh coats of oil to dry wood veneer. They perform this meticulous labor because the original product still fundamentally matters. An old American speaker with a solid, heavily braced cabinet, a properly repaired heavy magnet woofer, and a crossover restored by careful hands can still do exactly what a plastic wireless cylinder running advanced DSP algorithms cannot. It can physically move enough actual air to make a recording feel intimately anchored in the physical room. This community does not restore these objects merely because they are old or out of a misplaced sense of nostalgia. They restore them because sound reproduction still begins and ends where physical air moves, and the uncompromising laws of acoustic physics cannot be completely cheated by a microchip. The American physical site today reflects this deep, structural division between the past and the present. The massive domestic manufacturing infrastructure that once built JBL cabinets in Northridge, California, has long since been completely transformed. The sprawling industrial facilities that once housed dedicated wood shops, massive magnet charging stations, and towering anechoic testing chambers have been repurposed, sold, or shifted entirely to global operations. The engineering legacy remains housed in the United States, but the intensive physical labor of actually building the boxes now belongs to massive overseas supply chains. The California address remains a vital office, a design center, and a corporate hub, but the true physical birthplace of the modern JBL Flip is a brightly lit, highly automated assembly line thousands of miles away from the Los Angeles basin. Yet there is a surprise footnote quietly hiding into the engineering of the tiny plastic cylinder. The passive radiators that visibly vibrate on the rubberized ends of every single JBL Flip are not a modern digital invention. They rely on the exact same analog acoustic principles of internal cabinet air pressure that American engineers in the 1950s and 1960s used to squeeze deceptively deep bass out of smaller wooden bookshelf speakers. The very technology that eventually helped destroy the traditional wooden cabinet was born directly from the exact same mathematics that originally built it. The story of the JBL Flip reveals a profound truth about how the country builds, sells, hears, remembers, and eventually discards sound. It reveals the massive, unbridgeable gap between what Americans say they value, absolute high fidelity, domestic craftsmanship, repairability, real wood, and honest engineering, and what the modern consumer market actually rewards: supreme convenience, minimal size, low price, extreme portability, wireless pairing, and constant novelty. The American listener was not forced into this transition. They voted deliberately with their wallet, deciding that the ability to easily carry a playlist in a backpack was ultimately worth sacrificing the lifelike illusion of the stereo soundstage. The parent company simply gave the market exactly what it demanded, and in doing so, achieved massive financial survival at the direct cost of its permanent, revered place in the center of the home. Somewhere, shoved in the back of a dark drawer in an American kitchen, a 5-year-old plastic cylinder sits with a completely dead lithium-ion battery, entirely incapable of holding a charge, quietly waiting to be thrown away. While miles away, an old, heavy wooden cabinet with a faded orange foam grille still sits perfectly positioned in the corner of a Midwestern American living room, its crossover carefully restored, its massive woofer properly refoamed, waiting for a silver receiver, a heavy vinyl record, and one more song. See you in the next one.